主耶和华是我牧者，我必不致缺乏。使我躺卧在青草地，领我安歇水边。
Well, welcome to a special Presbycast. We have a repeat guest, but he's coming to us from a locale that's several thousand miles further away than usual. He's from China. We've spoken to him before, and he'll tell us a little about himself. I should say that Resby is traveling. He's not with us, but he was very excited about this topic and this guest, having remembered him from years past. We love to do international shows, but we really like to do international Presbyterian shows, and our guest comes from China, one of maybe one of the hardest, but in some ways maybe easy. Maybe there's a receptive audience to Presbyterianism and things Reformed. Pastor David, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
And we recorded with you in Tennessee and in Georgia previously, but you're there in China now, and due to your habits, this time of day works fine for you, and we're glad that the connection's working and that you're with us. So, we talked to you before 2020, and interestingly, we talked to you in February of 2020 when COVID was already a thing in China, where you lived most of the year, I think, but it hadn't really hit here, but then you got stranded here for longer than you intended to. So, what's the state of the church since COVID in China, the land where many people, there's no consensus on that, believe that that's where COVID started?
Right. Yes. I think COVID actually, if we focus on the perspective of what's the impact it has in the house churches in China, I would say, once again, God uses evil for good. The house church actually sees COVID as a wake-up call. I would say before COVID, my introduction of the house churches will be very different. They're still faithful, but you could tell the church is becoming I would say church is becoming more relaxed because, the economy is going great. Everybody's getting richer. Kids are having a bright future. So I would say before COVID, the church is slowly, they're still very, all in on Great Commission, but you could tell that it's slowly drifting. They are slowly, in their heart for the gospel is slowly being quenched down. But COVID hit, and actually, all the churches I know, they have become aware that, hey, the way they interpret COVID is this. And this is from the Chinese church perspective. They have a habit of always try to see, or at least try to interpret according to scriptures, what from the perspective of God, what's going on, instead of just, okay, from my perspective, how this will hurt us. So the way they interpret COVID is this. The world is not, once again, God has shown the world is not the finality. I mean, obviously we know that by our faith, but a lot of times in practice, we still focus on the world, the glory, eternity. Of course, we believe that, but a lot of times that could be in the back burner. And that's happening to the Chinese church before COVID too. But during COVID, the church has a wake-up call and realize, once again, we're reminded by God that this world is dying away, that this world is a quicksand, that this world is fading away. This world, no matter how much we invest, cultivate, it could be destroyed by sin or whatever in one fell swoop. So the thing is, while we're in this world, God wants the church to primarily evangelize, primarily do the Great Commission, primarily mission, primarily church planting. So on the one hand, COVID did bring a lot of suffering to the church in China. I mean, I could give you endless stories about how members lost their families. Now, ironically, and I know this probably will bring up another can of worms, but I'll just make this comment. At least from my observation, a lot more people suffer primarily from the lockdowns and shutdown of the COVID rather than the disease COVID itself. Anyway, so yeah, the church did suffer greatly, but their response is, okay, that just means that we're being reminded that we need to go back to our roots, which is Great Commission. So ever since COVID, I see the churches here has a renewal commitment of the Great Commission ministries, like especially in the areas of church planting and missions. They are sending out their own missionaries and church planters like never before, and that's an encouraging sign. Now, of course, unfortunately, last year, I would say second half of 2021 and the whole year 2022, the government has executed, I would say, the great persecution. For example, for the last year and a half, when I say last year and a half, I mean the 2021 and 2022. Actually, no. Oh my gosh. Last year's 2023. I'm sorry. 2023 and the second half 2022. Every church I know got persecuted one way or another. Luckily this year they seem to ease. So there was a wave of persecution, but that kind of strangled the church a bit.
Okay. So
but now I would say, so currently.
What form would that take?
Oh, what form of persecution? Okay. Let me just give you some examples. The most common ones are just a scare tactic. For example, the police will rush into your worship house. So, we worship in houses or apartments. So police will rush in about, 20 or 30 of them, take out everybody's ID, lock up the leadership, maybe for a day, basically just threaten them, hey, don't do this again. We really don't appreciate it when you do this. But let me just give you more to that, just to show you the complexity of China. Now, when they do that, as the Westerner, we interpret that, oh my gosh, we can never do this again. But see, in China, we all understood what the police really mean is, don't do it on my turf. Go somewhere else. I don't want you here. Because if they really want to arrest you, they'll arrest you. I mean, they really want to put you in jail, they'll put you in jail. So that's why I call it mild persecution. That police will threaten you. So what you do is you pack out, you probably move to another area that's not under their turf. You hopefully the police over there will be more understanding. So that's one persecution. That's more mild. But of course, unfortunately, there are also more violent ones. For example, right now the big thing is about churches starting their own Christian schools. A lot of my former students or a lot of churches I serve, they have their own Christian schools. And the government really hates that because government sees education, state education as a must for their propaganda. So they really crack hard on Christian school last year. And for example, one of my students was a principal of a Christian school, elementary school, and she was arrested and she was locked up for a week. And when she came out, I mean, there's like bruise and everything all over her body. So she suffered a lot, and we really have to counsel her for a long time after that. So unfortunately, violent persecution still happen. And let me just give you an extreme case. There's another student of mine that has his own Christian publishing, and he was arrested, but he was arrested about 3 years ago, actually. But we never heard from him again. Any attempt, either through a lawyer or through the family or just, inquiry, they just say, nah, we can't tell you anything. The case is ongoing. But we're like, hey, it's 3 years. They're like, well, whatever. Yeah, I mean, we're praying for the best, but we're preparing for the worst. But so just give you 3 examples of persecution still going on. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So when the police or whoever comes in, are there any people among them that you know to be Christians that are, or is it all, I mean, there are enough Christians in China that they're involved in the military, obviously, and law enforcement and government. I think government to some degree. I wonder if they ever are forced to participate in something like that and maybe make it milder than it would be. I don't know.
That's a great question. because I have had classes where some of my students are policemen, but then again, they're traffic police. Like, I guess that's different. Now, because the thing about Chinese Christian is, as soon as they're converted, they will stay away from government positions by themselves, just out of their faith. For example, a lot of my former students are former Chinese Communist Party members, but as soon as they converted, they just drop out of the party. I know a lot of Christians that used to be in influential positions in the government, but as soon as they converted, they just make up an excuse and quit. Now, of course, we can argue if that's the wisest thing to do, but that's so far, that's kind of their mentality. Say, hey, if I'm for God and now I know the government, the party is so evil, I can't be part of this.
Yeah, I mean, you don't tell them they have to.
Just
you don't tell them they have to, but you don't tell them they shouldn't either.
You know what? I'm starting. Well, usually this is what I tell them. Is there any way that you can refrain yourself from sinning in that environment? Because obviously you don't want to say, "Hey, I'm sinning for the Lord." That's ridiculous. See, that's the unfortunate challenge. Because usually I'd ask them, "Hey, why do you just stay within the system? Maybe you could be the light in the darkness." Even like doing some subversive evangelism. But their answer is always this: "That's fine, but you know what we do? We do a lot of sin." And if I want to remain in that circle, I have to sin with them. Because if I don't, then they'll find out. Yeah. So that, I guess that's the challenge. Yep.
So we didn't really, and you'll only want to say as much about this as you think you should, but you talked about your students. So tell us broadly what you do, and your role there. And then we want to talk a little bit about, whether denominations are even possible, what it means to be, house church, not exactly what we probably think it means over here, but talk about what you do, and then we'll talk about who you work with. Okay.
I started mission to China 20 years ago. At first, I was following this veteran. His name is Jonathan Chow. He's been before he's with the Lord now. He's been doing missions in China since the 70s. So he kind of brought me in, took me under his wing. So 20 years ago, I started going into China with him, primarily in the initial stages, teaching theology, teaching about the Bible. Then more and more, God called me. I feel God's calling me to be full time in China, and so I've been going in more and more. And then I was still pastoring church in the States. But in 2008, a church in China called me to help them start a seminary. And by Lord's blessing, we did that. So I did that for that church in China from 2009 to 2015, when I handed the seminary to the locals. So my primary, ministry in China right now is theological education. I do serve churches all around China. I'm not committed to one church. And the reason for that is this. See, in China, it's an interesting culture. If they know that, for example, you belong to that church or you're committed to one particular church, then your relationship with other churches won't go too deep because they'll always see you as someone that belongs to that particular church. But because I'm able to just say, hey, I'm just a partner from afar. I'm just here to help you know God. I can actually build great relationship with all the churches, at least all the churches I serve in China. So that's why I take this strategy. And then so primary theological education. So I help set up 4 or 5 other reform seminaries around China. And I still regularly go teach there every year. I regularly go to these 4 or 5 different reform seminaries in China. Now, actually, I'm also adding more training at church because I don't want a disconnect between seminary and church. So I'm actually provide a lot more, I would say, discipleship training, also leadership training in church. And usually, how does that look? Usually, I would just go through like Herman Bavinck's Reform dogmatics to give them a foundation of Reform theology and to apply from there. At the same time, I also gather together regularly with different local pastors to kind of strategize about the Great Commission, to talk about missions, talk about church planting. And finally, once a year, I organize a major Reformed Theology and Chinese Church conference in Hong Kong. And by Lord's blessing, we have about 500 Chinese house church leaders attending every year. And that's with partnership with Westminster Seminary, Philadelphia. So they'll send some speakers, I'll invite some local speakers, and we'll have a 4 days, 3 nights conference. So that's been very rewarding as well. So that's primarily my ministries in China. Yep.
Yeah, I think at those conferences in Hong Kong, you have speakers that any American conference would be thrilled to have. It's not people.
Yes.
It's not people you haven't heard of, and of course,
That's right.
I know people personally who have taught there, and it's quite an experience. Just going to Hong Kong is an experience in and of itself. So let's talk about the range of churches that you work with, because I mean, I gather there's not the same, robust ecclesiological structures in China for good reason and for understandable reasons that we have in the U.S. But tell us what a house church is, which I think just sort of means independent church. It's not approved by the government. And tell us about the status of denominations, ecclesiology, connectionalism, if there is any of that.
Okay. Yes. Quickly, what do we mean when we say a house church? I mean, the term actually had different emphasis in different era. Now, for the sake of clarity, I'll start with the modern era where we are right now. When we say house church, we mean it's not under any government ownership, or, for example, in China, there's the Three Self Church. That's a state-sponsored church. Like the pastor is actually on state salary, and they answer to the state. Now, I just want to emphasize, I know some people say, oh, no, Three Self Church, they're still pretty independent, the pastor still preach the gospel. There might be exceptions, but their structure, their system, their foundation is still state, they still answer to the state. They're government employees. And what the house church just means is, Christians that's being called by God in other ways, and they gather and they form their own church. And now, traditionally in the past, when we say the house church, we meant the rural house church, because after the communism took over, they pretty much try to wipe out Christianity, especially from the urban settings, and they lock up a lot of pastors, etc. But the gospels has still been spread like wildfire in the rural area. And in China, in the ancient days, it's like 80%, 90% of population is the rural area anyway. So that's where the people are. But then in the 80s, when the modernization started happening, urbanization started happening, what you have is a lot of people from the rural areas going to the cities to find work and jobs. And this actually created a new phenomenon, what's called as the modern house church, which is primarily urban. But the modern house church also, you have a kind of like two different, one is house church from the people from the rural area. They come to urban settings for work and they form their own church. That's one urban house church. But what you have another one is an indigenous city house church. What happened there is, these are people that may have converted in college campuses or people that come back overseas. So they're not really from the rural area. They grew up in the city. They were trained in the city. They got converted in the city. And then they find themselves, I guess, in terms of their background, identity doesn't really fit the rural house church. So they will form their own church. So today, when you talk about a house church, actually the primary focus now is these new urban churches. I'm not saying the rural churches are not important anymore. They're still there, but the ones with the strongest growth today would be the urban house churches. So that will be the differences. Now, in terms of how do we people in the West try to kind of understand and comprehend their existence? Because in the West we kind of define the church in denominations like Presbyterian, Baptist, and Baptist, etc. I would really say this. That think of a Chinese house church today with the New Testament paradigm where churches are identified by cities. So, in New Testament, you see Paul addressing, churches Corinth, church in Ephesus, church in Romans. This is actually how house churches in China identify themselves. Now, of course, they will have particular names, but in general, they will identify themselves as, church in Shanghai or church in Beijing or church in Xiamen. I would say that is still the primarily self-identification. And that's how they distinguish from other church bodies. Now, do they have a theological distinction? I would say for the last 10 to 12 years, that is the primary focus now. I mean, obviously they partner more and more people from the West, like me and others, that kind of get exposed to, okay, what's a denomination? What are different theological traditions? So they are starting to recognize, whereas from the past, each with their own, just read the Bible, try to figure it out. Now, they try to identify, okay, which tradition do we want to inherit or do we want to follow after? And I would say, at least primarily the churches I serve with, Reformed theology is the preferred choice. So I would say there's two primary theological traditions that has a grip of Chinese house church. One is Reformed theology, the other is Pentecostal. Now Pentecostal for their reasons, I won't focus on that today. But Reformed theology kind of hit because modern urban house churches, they tend to be highly educated. Like I say, most of their members are usually college grads. So Reformed theology, I guess just for the sake of how it's written and argued and present itself, kind of resonate with them in terms of understanding and the fits their model. So I would say Reformed theology is a preferred theology in urban house church today. Now, just one quick caveat. Unfortunately, there's so many pseudo-reform people in China that kind of give Reformed theology a bad name. For example, you have a lot of Chinese self-proclaimed Reformed theology guru that kind of, it's kind of what we were identified as, hardcore, hyper reform that always bang your head on the Bible. For example, they will go around and say that, hey, if your church don't believe in like predestination the way I present it. Now notice what I'm saying. I'm not just saying you don't believe in predestination the way I present it, that you're not a true church, or you don't believe in election the way I present it, that you're not a true church. And a lot of times the way they present it is actually pretty problematic. But anyway, so that kind of gave Reformed theology a bad name for the last 5 years, I would say. And so unfortunately, so pray for China if you're a Reform audience. Unfortunately, Reformed theology kind of, the reputation has taken a hit for I would say the last 5 years. So hopefully, God will change that. Anyway, yeah.
So there aren't, except for the state church, the three self, there aren't really denominations as we would think about them in the U.S. Are there affinity groups, sort of, or are there kind of loose local associations of any kind, or maybe over a wider geographic area?
Yes. Again, I would say the primary association is still location. For example, now I don't, when I say that, I don't mean everybody believe the same thing within that location. I mean, within that location, you might have people that's very reformed, and you might have people that's pretty, evangelical, and maybe they like reform, but they're not all in, they're pretty evangelical. But I would say they still like to I guess the familiarity, like the sense of identity as a family of people of God. Location is still a primary factor. But I would say, yes, they are starting to recognize we do need to have theological distinction. So, for example, churches in Shanghai, you see that happening. You see a group, and now if this is good or bad, obviously that's another argument. But for example, in Shanghai, it used to be one big happy family, right? And then, you have they started sending people out to the States. So some of them really fall in love with Mark Denver, and some of them really fall in love with Westminster. So when they come back, so you have a group that says, "Hey, we need to go all in."
Did you say
on
Mark?
on the back,
Did you say
Mark Dever.
Mark Dever or Mark Driscoll?
Yeah, Mark Dever.
Okay, yes, the
The
Baptist.
Baptist guy. Yeah, the Baptist. Yeah, no, not Mark Driscoll.
So he even causes division in China. That's terrible.
You said it. Anyway, so Shanghai now, so a group of churches just like, hey, you know what? We can't be together anymore. We're all in on the Baptist stuff. Of course, there's another group that says, yeah, well, we really like Westminster. So I guess you are starting to see that happening as the Chinese church, house church getting more exposure to Western theological traditions. That theological traditions started to kind of be their new self-identity. But I would say that is happening, but it's still not the primary self-identification. Not yet. I mean, maybe in the future, but not yet. Yeah.
All right. So is infant baptism of church members, is that a thing in some of the churches that you serve?
Traditionally, the Chinese house church do not do it. Now, I would say they do not do it for some reasons. One, they don't really understand it, so they decide to go on the road of caution. We're not going to do anything we don't understand. So the reason I emphasize that is when I go to a church, when they don't have it, I usually ask, okay, so why are you against it? They're like, no, we're not against it. We just don't understand it. If you're going to teach us, yeah, sure, teach us. And usually after I taught them, give them my spiel on why infant baptism is biblical, I would say 9 out of 10 churches are doing it. So I would say the reception is actually good. Again, the primary reason they're not doing it before is they just never heard somebody really make a biblical case for it. Now, of course, like I said before, there is Baptist influence. So there are some churches that just say, hey, this is wrong. This is not biblical. You need to repent. So that influence is there too. Of course, obviously there are a lot of Baptists in China too. But I would say for the most part, when I go to a church, I don't badmouth either one. I just say, hey, I'll present why I think infant baptism is biblical. And I'll even give you the reasons why some people think it's not. Let's sit down and reason together. And yeah, like I say, to my pleasant surprise, 9 out of 10 churches, usually after I do that, they'll say, yeah, we should start doing it. Yeah, this just sounds good. Yeah, sounds biblical.
So I think we forget how young the church is in China, and how, because of persecution and being remote from the world in many ways for a long time, they don't have the theological riches to draw on that we've had so easily for centuries. Just hasn't been a thing there. But ecclesiologically, I guess as a Presbyterian, I've got to ask, what sort of understanding of office, pastoral calling, pastoral examination, ordination, all those things is there? Is that something you try to inculcate when and as you can?
Yes, actually, that is one of my primary focus for the last couple of years. Because yes, you are perfectly correct. Let us not forget that the Chinese house church is a very young church. So do not see them as, courageous heroes like the Reformation. But we can't see them as courageous heroes like the very early church. It's kind of like the apostolic church just without the apostles. So a lot of things they do their best try to figure out from the Bible, but unfortunately without modeling. For example, the New Testament church, they have apostles as their models, but the Chinese church do not have perfect models like the apostles. So what happened was, and I say this with a heavy heart, a lot of time their theology is perfect, but their practice is still very Chinese culture. That's put it mildly. To put it worse, their practice is still very communist. Well, what I mean by that, because you can imagine, like, you grew up just watching how the communist leadership behave as a leader. Now, of course, you realize that it's wrong, but it's kind of like, when you become a leader, when that's the only model you know all of your life, you kind of can't help it. But when you do your leadership, you act kind of like them. I mean, maybe you act in a loving or Christian way, but you still act like them. Let me give you an example. For example, for us, our natural instinct is, leadership is servant leader. Yeah, we're a leader, but we're a servant leader. We're not better than you. We're just called to be in a leadership as servant of Christ. So we're here to serve you as the leader of the church. But in China, when they become a pastor or an elder or the leader of the church, their understanding of leadership is, okay, I have all the authority now. Just shut up and listen. Now, of course, I could be a good Christian. So when you shut up and listen, well, okay, but it's still in a very loving, encouraging way. That's great. But of course, there's always a bad apple in the lot, right? So if there's a bad Christian leader that acts like a total dictator, now we have a problem. So this is why I kind of focused my theological training for the last couple of years in like you say, teaching about what does it mean to be a biblical officer? What does it being an elder really mean? What does it being a deacon really mean? And when I say what it really mean, I don't just mean like give them the theology of eldership. They actually got that. I mean, okay, how to really apply that, to say in a way, and again, I say this with a heavy heart. So far, I think the gospel has definitely informed them, but they haven't really grasped how they should change by the gospel to be Christ-like in every way, and not just knowing Christ's knowledge, but being Christ himself. I think they need to be taught on that. See, we learned that instinctively by modeling. We have great leaders at church. We just model them. We have great pastors at church. We have great husbands at church. We have great sons at church. We just model after the great people we know that's around us. They don't have mature, experienced leaders in those qualifications. So they're just trying to figure it out. So I've been helping them with that. And also related to that, also church polity. Again, I mean, they read the books, but we know it's reality so different than the books, right? So when they think about, okay, how to be a Presbyterian, I mean, they can read their Hodge, they can read their others, but in practice, it will always going back to, oh my gosh, they're just another CCP, just a spiritualized CCP in practice. So I find myself spending a lot of times actually on the nitty details on why we should do it this way, why we shouldn't do it this way, etc. So yeah, so that is part of my new focus in terms of my teaching.
So you're saying that the default is sort of authoritarian. They expect to be led by authoritarians, and then when a leader gains power, he expects to have power as an authoritarian and use it, maybe with the best of intentions, but you're saying that's kind of what's hardwired into the normal person's expectations.
Yes, that's hardwired as part of Chinese culture. And so far, they haven't let the gospel really penetrate them, or nobody really challenged them on the gospel penetration that your whole culture needs to be renewed, not just your knowledge.
Yeah, the church culture. And, like I tell people, Presbyterianism, plurality of elders and churches and officers being accountable to each other, that's actually good news for the person in the pew. It doesn't always work properly, as we all know, but it is a good thing. And I try to tell new members, this is good for you. There's a backstop for you. Of course, and I assume you're just trying to sell the same thing and explain it. But easier said than done, as you said.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, like I say, my biggest shock when I first came to China 20 years ago is, after I, worship with them, they have lunch together, and I try to just sit with any table, mingle with the members, and they all freaked out. They're like, "Hey, you're a pastor. We're not worthy to sit with you. You need to go sit with the other pastors on the better table." At the pastor's table, usually got the best dishes, or the members will eat like, fish head or something. Anyway, and
hold on, yeah, the fish head was the good food or the lower food?
Actually, that is my Americanness in me came out. Yeah, fish head in China was actually be considered a delicacy. Yeah, okay. Only the leaders eat fish head. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for your correction. Yeah, that was my quick American idiom that just came out. Yeah. So they will be eating like the peasant food, and I'll be sitting at table eating like the rich people food, and I was like, you got to be kidding me! What kind of church is this? And then I realized this is just part of Chinese culture. They so respectful of leaders. They don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah, and I remember leading the seminary. I quickly have a staff around me, and I would have staff meeting with them. And every time I would say, okay, so what do you think about this? Nobody would talk. And when I asked them directly, they would be like, what do you think? I was like, I want to know what you think. They're like, well, what do you think? We'll just do what you think. I was like, no, we need to talk about this. They said, no, it's okay. Just tell us what to do. We'll do it. And that's just part of the ingrained Chinese culture, very authoritative. If you're not a leader, you just shut up and listen. You just shut up and execute. You might have bright ideas, but you're not allowed to talk about that until you become the leader. Then it's your turn. Yep. So.
Well, that's, we live in, of course, democracy is a disputed term, but we do have, Americans are probably hardwired for, democracy and, autonomy, in an almost opposite way of what the people in China are. So that is not, we would just assume everybody would want to do it the way we do it. But of course that's not true. And I've heard similar things about Korean culture too, that it bears some similarity maybe, to what you find in China, but you don't, that's not your field and we won't get into that. So yeah, I mean, it does. Well, are there any leftover Roman Catholic or Anglican, old Anglican missions or anything like that? Or is there? I mean, it would seem to be suited to episcopacy, but the thing about being a bishop is you would be more in the crosshairs of the government, I gather.
Yeah, I would say, well, first, there are still Roman Catholics, but it's very few. I think the last number, if I remember correctly, is less than 1 million. So now obviously that's not my forte, but last I heard, and like I said, when I travel around, I mean, usually people tell me about different churches here and there, and Roman Catholics, it's really rare when I bump into them. So yeah. So that's one. Now, in terms of Protestantism, within the Protestantism, it is true that before communists took over, there is a variety. But even before communists took over, Presbyterianism was the strongest. And I guess when communists kind of wipe out all the formal churches, so it really become an indigenous grassroots movement. So I guess Episcopalianism was just rejected outright. So they just went in a very indigenous system where they just have elders and just have elders.
Right.
They don't even have they have elders, but they don't even have pastors. The way, obviously as PCA, we understand pastor as a teaching elder. But for the Chinese house church for a long time, they don't dare to call people pastor because, again, in their very direct reading of the Bible, they see pastor as a position that somehow needs to be officially ordained by a foreign body. So they're like, okay, we're just an indigenous house church, so nobody ordained us, but we can still call each other elders. But we don't dare to ordain each other as pastors. So yeah, that's actually a very interesting take, that related to how they understand ecclesiology. So ordained pastors are, interestingly, it's actually a very recent phenomenon. I would say within the last 10 years that you see more and more ordained pastors in China. Yeah.
So one of the things the church lacks is what we would consider a really good, robust, biblical ecclesiology, which provides for the, spiritual and physical welfare of the congregants. So that is a great need. But you were talking about the gospel earlier. Well, the church is an element of the gospel. Stuart Robinson had the book, 19th century book, And that was the title, The Church of God as an essential element of the gospel. And that's what it'd be good for the Chinese people, I think, to understand, is that the church and her officers and structure is part of the great benefit of the gospel.
Yes, and yeah, that's another thing I've been focusing on for the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, is to really reinforce a foundational understanding of ecclesiology. Because in the past, they kind of understand ecclesiology as an organization only. So they will run churches, like, for example, as a company or as a school, just kind of they use a secular organization as a model and trying to organize their churches that way. Whereas, like you say, a robust, a true biblical, ecclesiology, the spiritual, organic element to that. So that's actually very foreign to them. And they just find it refreshing to learn about that and to think about church in a new light. Yep. So that is happening around China. But I still, I would say there's still some way to go. Yeah.
So you said there's about 1 million Roman Catholics, maybe. How large is the Protestant church? And we're not saying everyone's perfectly orthodox and that they got everything together. But how many Protestant Christians do you think there are in China right now?
Yes. Let me first give you, I actually did this. You actually got me at the right time. I just did a lot of research on house church, because my latest project is try to compare the Chinese house church with the early church movement in the Roman Empire. I just see a lot of similarities. But anyway, and one of the things I researched is the rate of growth. Let me put it this way. In 1949, before communism took over, there's an official document that says Protestant in China is 1 million members around China. That's 1949. Now, of course, during the persecution, etc., nobody's really keeping a tally. But interesting, I found this communist religious research document. So this is the official document of the communist government in 2018, the white paper on Christianity in China. By their calculation, so again, this is the government's official calculation, in 2018, the number they say is now 38 million. So you see from 1949 is 1 million, 2018 there's 38 million. Quick math, that's a 67% growth every decade. Just I did a quick math on that. Now, and the scary part is that's just the government number. And the reason I say that's the scary part is government number, obviously for political reasons, and China is such a face culture, that number is likely lower than reality. And that's only what the government can count. Now, we know that house church is not going to tell the government how many they are. So the reality is probably, I would even say, a lot higher. For example, even in my just personal experience, I know, I don't claim to know every single house church, but just as if we can pull the extrapolation on it, I have served 4 churches in China. One church claimed to have 2 million members by their own conservative estimate. Another church, again, 2 million. So that's 4 million.
So is this like a denomination or an affiliation of some kind?
No. Yeah. Good question. It's funny. They still call themselves a particular city church.
Okay. So cities. Yeah. I keep forgetting.
Yeah. But the funny part is they have churches all over China.
Multi-site. Yeah.
Yeah, so for example, it's kind of like you would go to New York, you go to church and say, okay, what church are you? And they'll answer, oh, Nashville, Tennessee church. And you'll be like, hey, we're in New York City, what's going on? Anyway, so they still use city as a self-identification. Anyway, so 2 churches I know are 2 million each. I used to serve a church that has 10 million members. And I used to serve another church with Jonathan Chow that has 15 million members. Now, that's just 4 church networks I know. And together, that's already 30 million. By the quick math. Now, unless they're lying to me, which I don't think they are, So I would say in reality, now if you want me to just put me at a corner and say, give you a number, I would you know what? This might sound crazy, but I really believe there's probably 200 million Christians in China.
Wow.
And that would be my best educated guess. Yeah.
I mean, I know China is larger than the United States, and a fairly large percentage of Americans would identify as Christian. I think it's arguable that the cultural penetration or the market share of for Christianity in China is pretty comparable to what it is here, is it not? I mean, you start running the numbers, it's impressive. And there are hundreds of millions. That's what I usually tell people. There's more than 100 million for sure. So to say hundreds of millions is accurate.
Yes. Yes, I would believe that. And in terms of penetration, integration, yeah, I would say again, probably except the government and the party system, the just because they're so evil. I would say, yeah, there's every area of China that even in a very upper echelon, that you can count on there's Christians there. For example, just in my ministry, I've known people that sells like military weaponry to the military. I've known people that's such a successful businessman that they can pick up a phone and call Beijing leadership anytime they want. You know, I've known people that's kind of like in charge of the whole city development of a major city in China. So yeah, I would say Christians are actually really integrated to every facet of society. But again, except the real evil roots of it. Yeah.
You know, we can be blinded and obsessed about local politics, national politics, and geopolitics. And, you know, we've always got to have an enemy. A lot of people would consider China to be our political enemy or rival, military, economic, cultural, the whole thing. But all those Christians in China are brothers and sisters of our own as Christians here. So the two things I'd like to ask is, what would you say to people? I mean, I think most Christians would tell you, yeah, I'm for the Christians in China and I consider them brothers and sisters, but I think we forget how many there may be. And also I wonder, is that large number of Christians long term, do you see it maybe, I don't want to say the downfall, but it's got to change things in the country. It's got eventually, I mean, there's a mass there that's hard to deny and hard to discount.
Actually, like I said, that's a perfect question to ask me right now, because like I said before, I've been doing a lot of research on the similarities between the early church and the Chinese house church, not just on the church part, on the entire environment. Like we all know the early church faced a very challenging Roman Empire that's very hostile towards their faith. And we know that 400 years later, Constantine pretty much say, hey, you know, Christianity is our religion now. Now, I'm not going to say it's a exact duplicate, but I am saying that if we're going on the same trajectory that, at least in my research, I found out, I really see that one day the house church in China will be used by God to transform the Chinese government, to transform the Chinese government in a way that it won't be a violent revolution, but it'll be like the Roman Empire where the government kind of just say, you know what, these Christians, their values, their morality, their faith, let's just adopt it and make it ours. Now, again, I don't mean it as a state religion. It'll happen in a very distinct way. But I really see that. I get, at least in my own research. So I do have an optimistic point of view of the future. Now, in my optimism, am I saying there'll be lesser persecution? No, of course not. In my optimism, am I saying that, you know, China-U.S. relationship wouldn't worsen? Of course not. But at least the trajectory I see, the church will just have exponential growth, more and more influence. And as the number populate the entire society, that itself will transform China internally and hopefully made the government have to recognize that, hey, these are the major people we just need to embrace. We can't persecute them anymore. Yeah, so I'm hoping that it'll happen in my lifetime, but Yeah, probably not, but probably another 50 to 100 years. But yeah, I'm praying. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, every country has to look out for its own interests. But we've got a rise of nationalism in this country now, and it's understandable in some ways as a citizen. But we're Christians too, those of us who are. And we do have to be, I think we have to be, I mean, that's something else you may see in your research, that there was a bond between Christians in different, political areas and geographic locations during the early church. But we can't deny, the presence and number and needs of Christians in other countries like China. We can't just always say it's my country first and I'm not worried about anyone else. We do have to sort of worry about our Christian brothers and sisters.
Yes, I totally agree. Like you say, the Chinese Communist Party does not represent China. Now, unfortunately, the world tend to think that way. Whatever we see how the Chinese communists act is how the Chinese act. We just need to really completely separate them out. So yes, under Xi Jinping's leadership, I mean, there's no secret. He simply hates the West. He's so indoctrinated in the Maoism that he's completely convinced that the West just want to colonize China, just want to make Chinese slaves. In his own mind, he's liberating the Chinese all over again, unfortunately. But for the Chinese people, especially Chinese Christians, and they want to show that they're a peaceful race, that it's so sad, really. They really want the world to know that they're just trying to survive. They got caught between the crosshairs between, two superpowers, I guess. But the Chinese people and especially Christians, they're just like, we're just trying to survive here. We're just trying to do our thing, survive, and give glory to God. And they have suffered because of the, crosshairs. And yeah, I would say that on the one hand, I guess as an American, I guess sometimes, like you say, because of nationalism, we're happy that, hey, see how our sanctions has destroyed the communist government, how our sanction has worked, how our economic, sanctions has, bring them to the knees. But on the flip side, in the field, what these sanctions did, these sanctions may have the church members lost their jobs. Most of them are now, barely surviving. A lot of them go hunger at night, and that's just reality. So yeah, the sanctions, on the one hand, on a high level, we say, we show these communists who's boss. But on the other hand, hundreds of million people are starving because of this. So we need to think about that. So yeah.
Yeah, the world is complicated, and it's probably going to get more so. This, you're not in the U.S. now, and it's a good time not to be here. I'll tell you that. I think there have been worse times to have been away than at the moment. So, well, of course, I think when you were at our church and what prompted what we're going to talk about next, I asked you about worship. What does worship look like in churches in China? And you made a distinction between rural, or maybe the rural-based churches that were even in the cities, and then you mentioned earlier the city churches. And I think what you said was that worship in those city churches, we'll call them city churches, rural city churches, and rural churches. But in the city churches, you said, well, it'd be pretty similar to what you'd see in a lot of PCA churches. They might have one service because travel may be different, difficult. So it'd be like your average PCA church. 85% of PCA churches don't have a second service, and worship in a fairly contemporary way. But then you said there is a difference between, you can just describe that generally between those three kinds of churches if you want to. But I want us to end up by talking about the Lord's Day in those rural churches and some of the amazing stories you told about that. But if you just had to say, what's the average Chinese church worship like, and what's their Lord's Day look like? Let's start there.
Yeah, Yeah, just pick about what you say. Let's first start with the easy one. Yeah, so the modern urban church, like you say, will be like a typical American church, American Sunday, maybe 3 hours tops, just singing, praying, a sermon. A sermon typically averages around, well, I think in China it's usually longer. It's like usually between 45 minutes to an hour, a sermon. And then, and then you have a closing hymn and a prayer and a tie and then close. So I would say the modern urban church in China is very similar to what you have in the States. Now, so here's the fun part. The rural church, the traditional house church, they have a very traditional full day service. So yeah, I think I was giving the story that, when I was first invited to preach in the rural church, I prepare a sermon and, when it's my turn, I go up there, give a sermon.
Well, but you even told about the ordeal of getting there. I think there was
you want me to share about that?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay.
Oh yeah, let's hear about it.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. First time going to a rural church and, so I got to China and so they say, okay, go to this place, buy this bus ticket, go to this town, someone will pick you up. So, okay. So when you hear that in your mind, you kind of picture a certain steps are happening. I got a bus ticket. Well, let's go a little detail. So the Christian that took me to the bus station kind of said, okay, where's your valuable possessions? Okay, this bag, got my passport, a couple $100. They say, okay, carry it on your body and never let go. And because it's an overnight bus, because you got a flat bed on the bus, he said, when you sleep, carry it on your body, never let go. I say, why? They say, because somebody will try to rob you. And I was like, what? What do I do? They say, oh yeah, when their hand comes, just slap it on the hand. And they know you're alert, so they'll never bother you again. And keep in mind, this is my first time in China as an American. I was like, what is this? So it's like, I kind of hold this bag, laying on my, bed, not bother anybody. And sure enough, some hand came over to try to open my bag. So I did what the guy said. I slapped his hand. And sure enough, that guy never bothered me for the rest of the journey. Anyway, that's quite an experience. So the bus stopped in the middle of the highway and say, okay, and point at me and say, this is your stop. Get out. So I was like, what? And then he's like, yeah, this is your stop, get out. And in America, a bus stop is a bus stop. You have a terminal and stuff. They say, no, get out of this. So I got kicked out of the bus in this, like, on the side of the highway. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And keep in mind, this is like this is the era when nobody has a cell phone anyway. So I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Well, apparently they know. So next thing I know, I heard like click, 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 click. Yeah, there's a car coming. It's kind of like a horse buggy. So somebody got a horse buggy, can pick me up. And then when he can pick me up, so I took this horse buggy to go in town. And then I got quickly ushered into this building where they boarded up all the windows, I guess just for safety, because we're teaching theology there. And then there's like 20 young men and some young women there, because in China, because of historical reasons, a lot of females serve in, ministry capacities in the church. So they need some theological training too. So I'll be teaching this 20 young men and women. And, they gave me like a bucket of water. I thought, oh, that's nice. Well, sorry, just clean myself up. They say, okay, this bucket of water, you have it for the whole day, for everything. I mean, literally everything. It's like shower, brush teeth, etc. And then I realized water is such a commodity there that the 20-some students, they share a bucket of water, because I'm the teacher, I get my own bucket of water. Anyway, so it's kind of challenging and, bathrooms got like a hole in the backyard, etc. So yeah, so it's that kind of challenging environment. But anyway, long story short, so I did my theological teachings. So they asked me, well, worship with us on Sunday, give a sermon. So yeah, be our preacher. So I said, okay, yeah, I could do that. So I have a sermon prep. So Sunday,
I'm sure you're staying at a 5-star hotel, right?
Oh yeah. Nothing but luxury. Yeah, it's kind of like, I think the bed is, if I remember right, just some pile of rocks. Yeah. So, yeah, like I say, a bathroom, just a hole in the backyard. So they're like, yeah, be careful, don't fall in, because it'll be hard to get you out. And then, bed is kind of like rocks. And then, yeah, shower, just that bucket of water, however I want to use it. Yeah. And I was foolish. I bought this fancy American soap gels when you put on your body, you need like a ton of water to get rid of. I
Yeah.
quickly put a stop to that. Yeah, quickly. Okay, no more that stuff. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, oh yeah, remember I said the windows are boarded, so the whole building's like 120 degrees. I remember I mean, sweating like a pig does not describe my experience, and everybody was sweating. So you can imagine the stench of the building after a week of teaching there. So yeah, all the top luxury situation. Now, so after the week, they say worship with us, be our preacher. I say, okay, sure, why not? I'm here anyway. So first thing I noticed, they start praying around 6 in the morning. So of course, yeah, I'll pray with them. Yeah, no problem. So, if I can remember right, so they start praying about 6 in the morning. I thought it's going to be a quick prayer. Well, next thing I know, we were sitting there kneeling down praying till like, I think 7:30. So the worship service started by an hour and a half of praying on your knees. And so we pray from 6 to 7:30. And then from 7:30, I think 7:30 to somewhere 8-ish, there's like, your typical hymns, etc. And then I think I got up there preaching around, if memory serves me right, around 8:30. Yeah, let's just say 8:30. So I got there preaching. I preached about an hour. I'm a long preacher, so I preached about an hour. So 9:30, I came down, and the guy kind of sitting next to me and say, "Wow, that's a wonderful sermon. Thank you." I say, "Yeah, you bet. I'm glad to do this." And the guy says, "Yeah, I can't wait to hear your next sermon." I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure I'm coming back. Somebody else planned the trip. I need to ask." They say, wait, and he kind of looked at me like I'm crazy. I'm kind of, okay. I say, okay, what are you talking about? I say, yeah, you're going back up there in 15 minutes. I was like, what? They say, oh yeah, you're going to preach again. And I say, I'm going to preach twice today. And he kind of looked at me and say, no. I say, okay. He said, you're going to preach 4 times today. I say, what? Yeah. Oh, they say, yeah. I say, how long shall worship? They say, oh, 6 to 6. That's what? Yeah. So now luckily, I have preached a few sermons before, so I kind of just put stuff together, whatever I can remember. But that was quite an experience. So yeah. So what happened is their worship.
They probably said, we like your first sermon, but your 2, 3, and 4 were not that great.
Yeah. No comment after that. So probably. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so I found out that when they say worship on Sunday, they literally mean that. So they will gather at 6, they do everything. Now they will eat lunch at 11:30. And then, so lunch will be 11:30 to 12:30. I remember this vividly because we don't do this in America. Then they will have afternoon naps together.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So they will take naps. Yeah, exactly. They'll take naps from 12:30 to 2. And then they'll start I guess you could call it evening service, but it's the same service from 2 to 6. And then they'll have dinner together, and then everybody be on their way home. Yep. So that's quite an experience. Yep.
And you said, I think the way you explained the reason that they would spend 12 hours together on the Lord's Day is because, as you explained it, they never knew that wasn't going to be their last one.
Right. Yes, they always treasure their time together with the Lord because they recognize that they're in a environment where they can be crushed and devastated every time. So they really treasure every worship service they have together, knowing that it could be their last one. Because, I mean, even back then, rural area persecution is a regular happening. And in a rural area, usually it's more devastating than in an urban setting. Because in an urban settings, you have a lot of, foreigners there, right, or foreign press. So the government kind of don't want to go overboard unless they really, really think they have to. But in a rural setting, there's nobody besides them. So it's easy for the government official to just say, you know what, kill this guy. I got tired of him. Yeah. So they really treasure their time together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite an example for some of our people who think an hour and a half is the Lord's Day, and that's about all we can be asked to submit to. I guess maybe they just don't have professional football in China, so there's nothing else to do, so that's what they have to do. Is that it?
I guess they definitely don't have NFL, so I guess. Yeah, but I would sense that I guess it's because from Monday through Saturday they have been so enslaved to I guess to the world and to the government's heavy-handedness that Sunday is truly a relief for them to just come together as a community of God. I mean, even me being with them, I can really sense their joy and relief and their hope for the future. Yeah, so that's at least for me, being with them, that's what I sense from them. Yeah.
So they do have I don't know if this is Western, I've always wondered, do all cultures have a 7-day week? Do they all have the concept of a Sabbath day? We know it's not always on the first day. But how did China come to have some concept of a Sunday? How is it these people even have one day a week when they can, traditionally gather together?
That's actually very modern thing, at least officially. I think officially when they have a Sunday off, I think I read it in the news somewhere that the government really didn't make that official till the 1980s when they tried to modernize themselves after the West. And I would say even today, for majority of workers in China, Sunday is a work day. When people tell you Sunday is an off day, you could tell he's probably a white collar working at a very successful modern company where they follow kind of a Western calendar where you get like Sunday off or maybe even a 2-day weekend. But for majority of jobs in China, especially if you're a factory worker, there is no weekends. Now, of course, the Chinese labor law says, hey, it's a 5-day work week, 40 hours. But we know Chinese laws are just there. They don't really mean anything. So in reality, I would say majority of Chinese workers in China, they work a 7-day week. And their week is usually 60 to 80 hours. And they have to work long hours to get a living wage. Because like minimum wage in China hasn't changed in like 30 years. So for example, minimum wage in China, I think it's like $2 an hour, $2 an hour. So if you really want to make money, you need overtime. And the owners know that. So the owners know they can abuse you. The owners know that you'll be begging to work 60, 80-hour weeks. He doesn't need to force you. You'll be begging for them to give you 60, 80-hour work week because that's the only time you can make a living wage. So yeah, this is why urban churches tend to be made up of middle to upper middle class, white collar, successful or pretty people with a decent career for them to come every Sunday. Because for a lot of Chinese, especially if you're in a factory worker, you just can't go to church on Sunday because you'll be working. Yep. So that's actually a challenge in China.
So, I mean, do they have churches at other times for those workers, or maybe having an evening service is beneficial to some that might be able to go to the evening and not the morning? I mean, what can and what does the church do to try to accommodate that?
I would say the rural churches do a better job here. The rural churches do have Friday and Saturday worship to accommodate them. But the urban churches primarily is a Sunday only church. So that's why I say the urban churches primarily their membership consists of white collar, successful people that has the luxury of a 2-day weekend. Whereas factory workers tend to they go to rural churches only because that's the only ones available to them. Yep.
Well, before I forget, we talk about food a lot on this program. You probably wouldn't know that, but I had some of the I talked about Laogan Ma, the godly godmother, sauce.
Yes.
And you said it is in fact very popular in China. That people put it on everything.
Actually, funny you say that. That was true the year I said it to you, but this year, Laogan Ma is actually going bankrupt.
Oh, you're kidding.
What hap yeah, yeah, what happened is she has, I think, a few sons, and they will try to fight over her,
Oh,
yeah, it's the same story. The sons, they're discontent, they want to fight over each other, who's the real inheritance. So they kind of sabotage each other. So La Gamma is actually lost favor now. Yeah,
oh gosh.
yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
they've made their packaging more fancy in the U.S., and that's usually a bad sign. So this is our Presbycast Eats section, and we're breaking news about one of our favorite condiments. Resby will be very unhappy to hear about this.
Yeah, hurry up, stock them out. You will probably won't see them pretty soon.
Oh.
Yeah, they're going back in China.
So, is there anything you just want to share with us, or, of course, again, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they can contact me. They know how to find me, and I'll put them in touch as long as they're not, an agent of the government or something. As long as they seem legit or we have mutual friends, I'll let them know. But is there any websites or just anything you want to share with an audience that's, a few thousand American Reformed people?
I would say, um, now, obviously, I know God works everywhere. We want God to work in America as well as anywhere else in the world. But I would say if you have a heart for China, if you just have a heart to be part of China's ministry, what God's doing there, let me know, because actually there is a lot of opportunities now. It's interesting. Yes, the Chinese government, the communist government is very anti-West right now, but at the same time, they are losing face because there's a lack of foreigners in China now. So that they actually made it very easy for foreigners to go to China now. So just quickly, I'm starting to bring back people I used to bring to China to teach and to serve the churches in China safely again. So there's opportunities there. And if you want other opportunities, like maybe just cultural exchange or just getting to know the house church in China on the trip, just pray together, get to know one another, that could be arranged too. And also please pray for them, because the church in China definitely needs a lot of prayers. I mean, yes, they are very courageous. God's blessing them, but they also need prayers. They also need to grow. I always use this analogy. See the Chinese church kind of like a teenager. Yes, they're courageous. They're full of heart. They'll run through walls. But at the end of the day, they're still a little immature. And
they do
they need
stupid
your
stuff.
maturity. Sometimes,
Yeah.
yes. So they definitely need the maturity of the Western church that we have inherited thousands of years of tradition that mold us into a spiritual maturity that we still have a lot to offer them. And don't see that. Don't miss that on your part. Yeah. So please, let me know. And there's definitely a lot of opportunities, another place we could partner together, pray together, and ministry together. Yep.
So I don't know if there's a website you want to give out or just keep it less formal. That's fine.
Website is usually a no. So unfortunately, what we're used to in the West, like, hey, is there a website? Is there a place I can check it out? No. As soon as I do that, you'll probably never hear from me again. So.
Yeah, we don't want to be the cause of your end.
Yeah.
Well, I was just teaching in Sunday school yesterday on Christian and faithful in Vanity Fair. And it was just striking how matter of fact it was. Oh, okay. Well, they chose to put faithful to death, and Christian says, "Well, I guess I got to move on." It was very, very matter of fact, and there was not a lot of. I told people it's not like the movies. There's not a lot of gory detail, and it's kind of like one of the gospel accounts just says, "And they crucified him." So it was very, very matter of fact, but we would hate to have to say, "Well, Pastor David was a good guy, but we got him killed, and we have to, we just have to move on." We don't want to do that. We've enjoyed, in-person fellowship with you, and hope to do it again, and hope to send you some more assistance. I do have, I don't think you've met our associate pastor, but through one of his roles, he actually does some teaching over Zoom to China as well. So. We try to be involved in all those things and as much as we can.
Oh, yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. And yep, like I said, there's a lot of needs, a lot of avenues, a lot of opportunities. Glad to hear that. Yep, so God works in many mysterious ways. Thank you. Yep, perfect.
You told the stories in person, but you probably can't tell the stories about the transit of certain published material into your way of getting published material into the country. But that was our local members enjoyed hearing that very much. Your the way that Underground Railroad almost of for books and literature. But that's one of the things. But that's one of the things you can use resources for is to get printed stuff in there.
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, I would say one of the biggest need in China is literature. I mean, that kind of made me realize why the church in the ancient times just fight tooth and nails to preserve libraries, to preserve books. One of the things frustrating about me, doing my work in China is like, you can't really follow it up because nobody has a good theological book, especially in Chinese. And that's just because it's so hard. Like, for example, if you ship a book in China, forget it. They'll confiscate it. And the receiver will probably be in trouble. So you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. So of course, I probably just shared a story about how I kind of developed this underground fruit truck network. I think that's the one I told you, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What happened is okay, so I guess I could share here too. Yeah, we ship books into Hong Kong. So Hong Kong right now is still relatively safe because they try to still preserve Hong Kong as a free port city. But anyway, so we would buy books and ship it to Hong Kong, and we got this fruit vendor that's also Christian that's willing to help us. So we will like package these books hidden within the fruits and then, ship it over the border. And usually the border patrol, they just look at a couple of fruit boxes and say, yeah, get in. Yeah. So the books might smell a little fruity, but it's there.
It's the fruit of the spirit. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
the fruit of the
vine.
spirit. That's right.
It's the true vine.
That's right. So yeah, that's one of our underground ways.
Yeah. Well, so that's some of maybe more of our listeners will meet you in person one day and they can hear more of these things that are both entertaining but encouraging and informative to let us know how to pray for you, but also how to kind of think about the world and not just think about our own national or denominational situation. So what's been
yeah, definitely.
It's been great to talk to you again. Again, people can contact me. I think they all know how, one way or another, to get in touch, and I can provide serve as a middleman, maybe, and some of our listeners will, they know we have a lot of mutual friends, and some of them have already met you, different places, but it's great to talk to you, and I hope your family is well, and we look forward to seeing you in the flesh sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much. And everything you said, I hope so too. Yep, hope to see the Covenant community again. And we always love them as you have loved us, and we really appreciate it. We pray for you often. So thank you so much. Yeah, man, we hope to see you face to face.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening to Presbycast.